Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of tiny habits, unlocking a healthier brain every day as part of the Thursday chats with the Memory Clinic. My name is Alex Brown-Theriault, and a little bit about me. I'm a registered kinesiologist. That just means I help people with exercise and movement. And I work at a diabetes program in Ottawa. And I've been working there for about 6 years. It's called the Community Diabetes Education Program of Ottawa. And we see clients from all over the Ottawa region. But I've been working in exercise for like 15 or more years. And I've found that long time ago, I found that I could design the best exercise program for somebody. But if they don't actually follow it, then it's not really any use. So that got me really interested into psychology. And then several years ago, I found out about the tiny habits method. I started applying in my own life, and I saw that habits that I wanted, all of a sudden I could create new habits very quickly, very effectively, habits that I still do to this day. So that led me to take the coaching certification program. And yeah, I've been able to help hundreds of people in our diabetes program create habits of their own. And so Tiny Habits, you can see on the right there, that's the author of Tiny Habits. His name is BJ Fogg, and we'll learn more about him later. Oops. Before we get into the Tiny Habits method and what that is, I'd love for us just to break down this distinction between behavior and outcome. Okay, so a behavior is really someone doing something at a certain time and place. An outcome is really something that's not within our control. We're not able to directly control an outcome. So I'm going to go through different examples, and I'd love for you to write into the chat, is this an outcome or a behavior? So the first example, taking a multivitamin at breakfast. What do we think this is? Yes, behavior. Absolutely. We're off to the races here. Losing weight, is that a behavior or an outcome? We often hear this from healthcare professionals. Exercise, eat better, sleep, and lose weight. Yeah, as if it was a behavior, but no, it's an outcome, right? There's things we can do to influence it, but ultimately it is an outcome. Scoring perfect on a memory test, maybe like one on the Memory Clinic website. Is this a behavior or an outcome? Okay, yes, I see more outcomes. Excellent. Drinking tea in the evening, behavior or outcome? I'll take a moment to take a sip of my decaf coffee. Yeah, absolutely, behavior. Well done. Okay, lowering blood pressure by 10 millimeters of mercury. Absolutely, outcome as well. Walking for 30 minutes, 5 days per week at a moderate pace. Is this a behavior or an outcome? Hey, yeah, you folks are right on today. Although it's maybe not an easy behavior, if it's not something you're doing already, it is a behavior, and it's fairly specific. Okay, last one. Getting 8 hours of great quality sleep. Is this a behavior or an outcome? Okay, and this one, I don't want to say it's a trick question, but I think you could make a case for either. But if you're someone like me that has trouble sometimes getting a good night of sleep, to me, it feels more like an outcome because it doesn't always feel like I can control it. But we've all heard of those people that can just, like a light bulb, they lie down and they fall asleep. For them, it might be a behavior. Yeah, so both. Excellent. So if it's something you're wanting to work on, it may be more of an outcome, and you may want to look at other specific behaviors that you can do. So with the Tiny Habits method, we are really focused on behaviors. Of course, there's outcomes we want, um, and that's great. Totally fine to have aspirations and goals, but when we're looking at the plans we're going to make, the tiny habits we're going to create, we're really focusing in on the behaviors, the things we can control. So if you're watching this back on YouTube or on the Memory Clinic website, we are going to pause part of the presentation because there is some copyrighted material. So if that is you and you're watching this back, you can visit www.tinyhabits.com/start-tiny. Okay, and I just want to show you quickly what that's going to look like so you can see what to expect. So what you're going to do is start here on number 3, start tiny. You can read that page. Number 4, find a good spot. Number 5, design your habits. And 6, rewire your brain. So yeah, I would love for you to put in the chat, what kind of habits would you like to create? What interests you in things that you want to improve on? We've heard so many times how important exercise is, not just aerobic exercise like walking, jogging, cycling, swimming, but also resistance training. We know that's important, whether it's body weight exercises, light weights, machines, healthy eating, getting better sleep, going to bed earlier, maybe might be the behavior. Okay, yeah, meditation. And then down on the right, that image is for social connection. I've also heard in a previous Thursday chat, the presenters were talking about brain games. So maybe that's something you want to start incorporating into your routine. And at this point, don't let them be small. You can let them be big. That's totally fine. If you're saying like, I actually want to meditate for 20 minutes every morning, that's totally fine. You can write that in the chat. We're not making them smaller just yet. Okay, drink more water, exercise more, and meditation. That's awesome. And so with exercise, I would, recommend, let's get more specific. What kind of exercise do you want to do? And with meditation, do we have a certain type of app we want to use? Is there a video on YouTube we want to follow? Or do we just want to count our breaths? Okay, some yoga. Okay, meditation on the internet. Awesome. So we'll keep looking back. So yeah, reducing screen time is an interesting one. So that is sort of, I don't want to say anti-behavior, but it's kind of an avoid behavior. We want to reduce something. So in that case, you might want to flip it to something positive, like taking breaks from sitting. And in that case, you might want to think about, where am I sitting the most? Is it while I'm watching TV? So it's a great example. So we'll definitely use that. How can we make a tiny version for, let's take yoga, for example. What would be something you can do that's yoga related in 20 seconds or less? And how about meditation? What is a 20-second version of meditation look like? For exercise or for the yoga, we could just simply do one pose for 20 seconds. That could be a tiny version. Yeah, exactly. Stretching for that short period. That's excellent. Meditation, it could just be taking 3 deep breaths. It could just be, I'm going to focus on my inhalation and then my exhalation for 3 cycles like that. That's great. How about a starter step? Okay, what could be a starter step for yoga? Now, that might be and when we're talking about a starter step, that's just the first step in the process. So if you have a yoga mat, maybe it's just laying out the yoga mat. If it's doing a video on the internet for meditation, it might just be turning on the computer or opening up your browser or opening up the app on your phone. These are all kind of the first step in the process. And neither is better. Just some habits may lend themselves better to a starter step, and then others might lend themselves to a tiny version. So, for example, if one of your habits is, I want to start eating more salads, that have 5 or 6 ingredients. Well, it's kind of hard to eat that salad if you haven't made it yet. So it might just be washing a vegetable or chopping a carrot. Okay. So these are our starter steps. Finding a good spot. So where can we actually add these into our routine? So, we have this picture of someone kind of going throughout their day. We have different things that happen in the morning, maybe some in the middle of the day, and then others at the end of the day. Where do you want to put yoga into your routine? Where's the best time? And so, yeah, just consider, okay, well, I actually have a lot of energy at lunch. So that's kind of something that I want to do after lunch. Or maybe it's after work or later in the evening. For some people, it might be like, okay, maybe I'm going to do a few stretches after I turn the TV on. Okay, so these are our anchor moments. Lastly, we have celebration. So again, this is could be something physical, it could be something verbal, or it could be a combination of the two. So I want you to think about, just to give yourself some ideas for what might work for you. Let's say you won the lottery, or you got some really positive news. What would you do with your body? What would you do verbally? What would you say? Or let's say your favorite sports team just won in the finals. What would you do? How would you celebrate? Okay. Another example could be, what would you say to your niece or nephew or your child if they just got accepted into the school that they applied for? How would you give them positive feedback? I remember for me, when I did my kinesiology exam many years ago, there was like 30 textbooks I had to study from. And I just kind of really wasn't sure how the exam went. And when I got that letter saying that I passed, I took my fist and I just brought it in. I was like, yes. For me, that kind of something about that feels very natural. Okay. So I'd love it if we could practice this with an example. One habit that I do, it's actually when I end Zoom meetings, because I tend to do 3 to 5 Zoom meetings per day. It's after I end the meeting, I will do 3 jumping jacks. Okay. I'm going to show some modified versions so you don't actually have to jump. And then to celebrate. And I'm actually going to suggest a specific celebration. So don't go just yet. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll just show you what we can do together. Okay, so it's actually kind of better if you're seated first. So if you have your phone in front of you, that's great. You don't have to call anybody. You can just imagine that you're on the phone, and just kind of picture that red button to hang up. Okay, if you have an old school phone, you can just pretend like you're hanging up. Okay, but you're going to imagine that you're pressing that hang up button. Then you're going to get up out of your chair, or you could stay seated and do a seated jumping jack. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Or get up out of your chair and do a standing modified jumping jack. 1, 2, 3, or if it's right for you, you could do a full jumping jack, okay? So yeah, we're gonna do it all together. And so yeah, let's start with our phone. Have our phone. Hope you're with me here. You can imagine hanging up. Let's do it. Click, stand up. 1, 2, 3. Now hands in the air and say yes. Yes. Okay, I notice I feel silly right now. Okay, so if you're feeling silly, that's totally fine. That's actually a good thing. If it kind of makes you smile, if it makes you laugh, that is the positive emotion that we're looking for. And ultimately, that's what creates that link between this anchor moment, which is hanging up a phone. You know, we all hang up phones, uh, and jumping jacks. So for me, every time I end a Zoom call, I don't think ahead of time, oh, I'm going to do my jumping jacks. It just pops into my head. Okay, end that Zoom meeting, and then I just think, okay, get up, I'll do my jumping jacks. Um, I don't celebrate really much anymore. I did at first. You don't have to celebrate forever, but in those first few days and weeks, the celebration is really going to help um, wire in the habit and make it automatic. Okay, awesome. Yeah, seeing some, it's not silly. I love it. That's great. Great idea. Yeah, I wish I came up with it. You know, I've always been someone that's fairly active. I try to eat fairly healthy. Um, but for me, um, a lot of daily chores, remembering to put my shoes away, remembering to turn off the coffee machine, so many day-to-day things. I would just be absent-minded and I would forget. And when I first learned about this method, I started using it, and now there's just these things that I just absolutely never forget. Um, so it really does work if you give it a chance. So we did want to offer an opportunity to sign up and practice this, but there also is the book. Um, that is something that you have to pay for. Um, I love the book. So this is it, Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. So if that interests you, absolutely go for it. I actually listened to it on audiobook, and B.J. Fogg narrates it and does a fantastic job. But you don't have to pay to learn this method. You can sign up for the 5-day email coaching program with me. And if people are interested, I would run this next week. And the basics of that is you sign up, you get an email that says, welcome to Tiny Habits. And then there's some information about how to learn the method. You've already learned the method though. So you create your 3 tiny habits and you put them into a form. And then from Monday to Friday next week, you get a daily email checking in to see how things are going. You don't have to come up with the habits from scratch. Okay, we have a lot of resources. So we call them recipes, tiny habit recipes. There's a software called a little online tool that's called Recipe Maker. So you can see what kind of examples interest you, and it's going to suggest like, oh, why don't you try that after you turn on the shower, or it's going to give you suggestions. So you don't have to come up with this all on your own, but you certainly can. So yeah, you get a daily email checking in to see how things are going. I usually send people an email once I see their habits that they've picked, and I'll just kind of, sometimes give little suggestions on how to modify it. So for example, it comes up fairly often that someone will say, well, I want to meditate after my coffee for 20 minutes. And I'll be like, okay, that's great. But can we just break it down to something 30 seconds or less? Now, you can always do more after you do your tiny habit. There's no limit. If it's meditating, you can always meditate longer. That's no problem. But we celebrate right after the tiny version. And you're going to get this email, so you don't have to worry about writing down My name's super long. You'll get this in the post workshop email today. So if that interests you, send me an email by this Sunday, and I will sign you up. These programs, by the way, that we're talking about, there's no cost to you. I also offer live online classes, again, no cost. If you're in the Ottawa area, there's a lot more classes available to you. They're meant for people at risk for diabetes as well as prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. However, there's so many risk factors for diabetes, high blood pressure, just being over 40. There's a lot of risk factors. So chances are that, yeah, you'll be able to access those at no cost as well. And that email will be shared in the post workshop as well. So often I'll coach people and then I won't see them again. But I did run into someone named Christine, who I coached several years ago with the Tiny Habits method. So I want to tell you a little bit more about Christine. Growing up in her early adulthood, Christine was someone that was very active and played a lot of sports. And yeah, it wasn't uncommon for her to walk over 15,000 steps per day. Sadly, though, Christine did suffer a number of concussions that made sports virtually impossible for her to compete in. And combine that with the beginning of COVID, Christine was checking in on how many steps she was walking, and yeah, it was pretty often 1,000 to 2,000 steps. So she went from walking 15,000 and playing other sports to not playing sports and walking 2,000 or less. 3 years ago, Christine took the Tiny Habits 5-day program with me, and she really wanted to focus on getting more movement. And then, yeah, when I spoke to her a few weeks ago, I was really yeah, impressed to hear that for the past 3 years, she regularly does her tiny habit, and she's seen herself do 8,000 steps, often over 10,000 steps per day. Um, and yeah, no, it was really incredible to hear that after such a long period of time, she's still doing it. And so, yeah, Christine's tiny habit is after I shut down my computer, I'll put on my walking shoes. And then, of course, you got to celebrate. And yeah, she told me 95% of the time after she puts her shoes on, she's out there walking. And sometimes it's shorter if she doesn't have as much energy, but oftentimes it's over 30 minutes. And then, yeah, there is some times when she said, like, I just didn't feel it. So I put my shoes on, I celebrated, and then I took them off. And it sounds really silly to do something so small, especially put your shoes on and then take them off. But this is actually one of the advantages of tiny habits. So when you still, because it's something you can do in 20 seconds or less, no matter how bad you feel, you can still do your tiny habit. And that keeps the habit alive, ultimately. So many times I see people starting exercise programs and they're starting small, 10 minutes of walking or 15 minutes of doing resistance band training, and everything's going great. They're building up, they're doing 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe eventually 45 or more. Then they get sick, then they get injured, and then everything is derailed, or they go on vacation. And we know that these things happen. We get sick. Sometimes we get injured, unfortunately. We go away. We're out of our routine. Um, with the tiny habits method, though, if you do get derailed, well, for one, it's much less likely that you're going to get derailed. And also, if you do get derailed, it's so much easier to start back, right? So I see people, it's like, well, what's the point if I can't do 45 minutes for, going on the treadmill or biking or walking? So yeah, in this method, it really helps keep the habits alive. Yeah, great question. So there's no age range. for the like 18 and over, it would be the age range for the exercise classes. And yeah, we run them a little bit differently. So you actually kind of saw an example of how we do that. So you saw that I had a seated version for a jumping jack, and then a modified version, and then even a full-on jumping jack. This allows people at any level to come to our classes. So yeah, they are for all levels. Most people are not doing seated versions. I'll say that, like a majority, but we do have some people that do everything seated as well. Yeah, because sometimes it can be tough to come up with versions for each exercise, but yeah, definitely try our best. Generally, they are in English. When I know that there's Francophone clients, I do speak some direction in French. Okay, yeah, great question. So how many tiny habits? So I mentioned that in the 5-day program, we start with 3. And it's a little bit different than what you might hear out there that like just focus on one thing. In this method, we kind of recommend starting with 3 because in some ways it actually makes it easier because you're learning a new method and there's a kind of small steps to figure out like, oh, where's a good place for this? How can I actually make this tiny? You're going to practice your celebration. So that's why we recommend doing 3. And a little bit different than if you were focused on, every day I'm going to go walk for an hour. Well, if you had 3 habits that took an hour, yeah, that's probably going to be too much. But because these things can take just a matter of 20 seconds, you can do more than just one at a time. Yeah, so most of the classes are in the afternoon. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 1 to 2 p.m. Those are the ones for people living in the Ottawa area. And then we also have, and in those classes, yeah, we do flexibility, aerobic training, and resistance training. So for clients living in the Ottawa area, we usually mail resistance bands, again, at no cost. And then we have a virtual walking group where we'll watch a video of someone kind of walking. Today we had that class at noon. So those are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 12 to 12:30. Today we were in Paris, walking around on the streets of Paris, and we'll usually play music as well. Yeah, okay, yeah. So the positive reinforcement is that celebration. So yeah, we know that like positive reinforcement can come in many different forms. Um, and so when you're training a dog, for example, you're usually using food or a treat. In this, we're trying not to use food or anything like that. We want it to be something that we can do ourselves, that's accessible, yeah. So it is. It's basically like self-praise. So you can also give positive reinforcement using praise. So for example, if you had a child that, offered to share a toy with another kid, you want to praise that because you want that behavior to happen, right? So you say, yeah, good job, like good sharing, right? That's praise, and that's a type of positive reinforcement. So this is like self-praise in a way. Wise, thanks so much for joining, folks. It was a pleasure to be here with you all. And yeah, thank you, Frederic, for inviting me. And yeah, thanks to the Memory Clinic for hosting these chats.